Hello everyone, welcome to Sleepy Crimes Hub. I'm here with you tonight to help you relax and slowly fall asleep. I know many of you are watching this video to rest your mind. So before we begin, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Now get comfortable, close your eyes if you like, take a deep breath, and let go of the day. Let's gently begin with case 1. On the morning of March 4th, 1981, in New York, a little girl named Sarah Wood was born into a quiet, faith-centered family. She was the youngest of 3 children born to Robert and Frances Wood, arriving long after her older siblings, Dusty and Nikki. The Wood family lived in the rural community of Sauquoit at 300 Hackadam Road, a place where neighbors knew each other and danger felt like something that happened far away, not on peaceful country roads. Sarah's father served as a pastor at Norwich Corners Presbyterian Church, and faith shaped the rhythm of their daily lives. Sundays were spent in worship, evenings in prayer, and childhood was filled with a sense of safety that only close-knit communities can give. No one in that household could have imagined that this same faith would later be tested in the most devastating way possible. Sarah was known by everyone who met her as a bright, joyful presence. She was intelligent beyond her years, deeply religious like her family, and full of life in a way that filled rooms without effort. She loved to dance, often twirling around the house when music played, and she had a gentle love for poetry, words flowing easily from her imagination. Her brother Dusty later remembered her as generous and affectionate, the kind of child who gave without being asked. One of her biggest joys was country music, especially the songs of Dolly Parton, which she sang loudly and proudly without any concern for who might be listening. Teachers at her elementary school echoed the same memories, describing Sarah as endlessly cheerful, always laughing, always giggling. One teacher recalled that Sarah's laughter was so infectious it often made the entire classroom laugh along, leaving the teacher struggling to regain control, smiling despite herself. Sarah wasn't just liked, she was loved. By the summer of 1993, Sarah was 12 years old, still innocent, still trusting, still seeing the world as a safe place. On the morning of August 18th, 1993, she left her home after a family shopping trip, preparing to attend vacation Bible school at her father's church. That day, she was in particularly high spirits. Before leaving, she sang Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 out loud, her voice drifting through the house as she climbed onto her bicycle. As she rode away, she called out cheerfully to her brother, "See you later," unaware that those words would become painfully final. She pedaled toward Norwich Corners Presbyterian Church, a familiar route she had traveled many times before, a path that should have been safe. Later that afternoon, around 2:30 p.m., Sarah was last seen riding her bicycle up a steep hill on Hackadam Road in Frankfort, New York, close to the church on nearby Roberts Road. She was heading home after her religious classes, less than half a mile from where she lived. She carried a display board, a church songbook, and vacation Bible school materials, simple items that reflected a normal child's routine. Some accounts would later suggest she had dismounted her bicycle and was walking beside it, pushing it slowly along the road. That small detail, seemingly insignificant at the time, would later haunt investigators because it may have made her more vulnerable in those final moments. Sarah was wearing a pink t-shirt with the words "Guess" who embroidered across the front, turquoise blue shorts, and brown sandals. She also wore her prescription glasses. Nothing about her appearance suggested danger. She looked like exactly what she was, a child heading home, thinking about nothing more serious than the rest of her day. When Sarah didn't return home, concern quickly turned into fear. Within an hour of her disappearance, her parents and siblings realized something was terribly wrong. This was not like Sarah. She didn't wander. She didn't disappear without telling someone. By that same afternoon, police were notified, and a massive search began almost immediately. Hundreds of state troopers and volunteer firefighters spread out across miles of fields, woods, and roads, desperately hoping to find the girl alive. The Wood family refused to sit still, searching their neighborhood themselves, knocking on doors, calling out her name, and printing missing person flyers that they distributed with shaking hands in desperate hope. Not long after the search began, Sarah's bicycle was found leaning against a tree just a few yards from Macadam Road. Nearby, hidden in brush, investigators discovered her coloring book and crayons. These discoveries sent a chill through everyone involved. The scene suggested sudden interruption, not a child choosing to leave. Investigators quickly concluded that Sarah had been taken from the area and transported away in a vehicle. The realization shifted the case from a missing child to a suspected abduction, and the urgency intensified. Over the next 5 days, search efforts expanded dramatically. State police, forest rangers, and trained teams combed the surrounding terrain again and again. Helicopters searched from above. Public appeals flooded the media. Despite relentless effort, no trace of Sarah was found. More than 1,000 leads poured in, each one investigated, each one carrying the fragile hope that it might bring her home. A reward for her safe return eventually grew to over $150,000. Across upstate New York, teal ribbons began appearing in public spaces, a symbol of Sarah and a community united by grief and determination. Within a week, the search reached far beyond local borders. A command center called the Rescue Sarah Center was established in New Hartford, New York, where every tip, every update, every possible clue was processed. Missing person posters were distributed nationwide. Sarah's face appeared on television programs like 48 Hours and America's Most Wanted. The entire country began to watch, to hope, and to fear the same question: where was Sarah and Wood? Years passed before answers began to emerge, and when they did, they brought horror rather than closure. In 1996, a janitor named Louis Stephen Lent Jr. was formally charged with Sarah's abduction and murder. Lent had already been convicted for attempting to abduct a 12-year-old girl in Massachusetts in January 1994, an attack that only failed because the child pretended to have a severe asthma attack and escaped. When police searched Lent's vehicle and home, they uncovered items that revealed disturbing intent: duct tape, weapons, and evidence of careful planning. Beneath his house, investigators found a hidden chamber he admitted was being built specifically to imprison, abuse, and murder children. After his arrest, Lent confessed not only to Sarah's rape and murder, but also to the earlier abduction and killing of another child, James Bernardo. His confessions painted a terrifying picture of a man who targeted vulnerable children, luring them, restraining them, and killing them without remorse. When speaking about Sarah, Lent described encountering her alongside her bicycle on Macadam Road, forcing her into his van at knife point, and driving her into the Adirondack Mountains. There, he claimed he assaulted her before killing her and burying her in a shallow grave near Roquette Lake. He even drew maps for investigators, but despite massive search efforts involving hundreds of personnel, dogs, and heavy equipment, Sarah's body was never found. Even after pleading guilty and being sentenced to life in prison, Lent refused to reveal the true location of Sarah's remains. He ignored pleas from her parents, her brother, prosecutors, and even the judge. In one of the most powerful moments of the case, Sarah's brother told him that while he believed he held power because he knew where her body was, her family knew where her soul was, and therefore, he had no power at all. Sarah and Wood's body has never been recovered. As of 2025, her family continues to wait, still hoping for the day they can finally bring her home and lay her to rest. Her disappearance changed laws, awareness, and lives. From unimaginable loss came nationwide efforts to protect children, educate families, and prevent similar tragedies. But for the Woods, the pain never truly ended. Despite Louis Stephen Lent's confessions and convictions, the investigation into Sarah and Wood's disappearance never truly reached a conclusion. Law enforcement agencies returned again and again to the Adirondack Mountains, particularly the area around Roquette Lake, driven by the hope that this time, after years of waiting, they might finally bring Sarah home. More than 100 state troopers, environmental conservation officers, search and rescue dogs, military personnel from Griffiths Air Force Base, and countless civilian volunteers combed the dense forests, digging through soil, brush, and rock. Heavy machinery cut into the earth while helicopters circled overhead. Meals were cooked by strangers, sandwiches delivered by grieving parents, and prayers whispered by volunteers who had never met Sarah but felt connected to her fate. Yet every day ended the same way, with no remains found, no closure achieved, and the unbearable realization that Lent may have deliberately misled investigators, enjoying the control he still held over a family's pain. As the years passed, investigators came to believe that Lent intentionally provided partial truths, enough to keep hope alive, but never enough to resolve the case. Prosecutors publicly stated that he had given almost everything except the final piece, suggesting a cruel psychological game meant to torment both law enforcement and Sarah's family. Even when offered plea deals, even when faced with direct appeals from Sarah's parents and brother, even when Bible verses were read aloud in court urging repentance, Lent remained silent about the one thing that mattered most. The judge himself acknowledged that if the death penalty had been an option, he would not have hesitated to impose it, not only for the murders, but for the cruelty of withholding the truth. For Sarah's family, the emotional impact was lifelong and relentless. Birthdays passed without candles. Holidays arrived with an empty space that never filled. Her parents lived every day knowing their child was somewhere alone, unnamed, unrecovered. Yet instead of allowing grief to consume them, they turned pain into purpose. The Sarah Ann Wood Rescue Center was founded to ensure that no other family would ever feel as helpless as they once had. That center later became part of a national center for missing and exploited children, helping to distribute millions of posters and playing a direct role in the recovery of thousands of missing children. In a haunting irony, Sarah, who could not be saved, became the reason countless other children were. The annual Ride for Missing Children, inspired by Sarah's love of biking, became a moving symbol of remembrance and resistance. Cyclists wearing teal and pink jerseys rode mile after mile, stopping at schools to teach children about safety, awareness, and trust. Each ride was not just a memorial, but a message that Sarah's life mattered, that her disappearance changed the world, and that silence would never be an option. Even decades later, teachers who once knew her could still picture her laughter, her messy hair in the mornings, her bright presence in the classroom. To them, she never became a statistic. She remained a child frozen in memory. As of 2025, Sarah Ann Wood's body has still never been found. The investigation remains officially open in spirit, if not in action, and authorities have not ruled out future attempts to extract the truth from Lent. Her family continues to hope, not for revenge, not even for answers, but for the simple mercy of a burial, a place to grieve, and a moment of peace. Sarah's story stands as one of the most heartbreaking reminders of how fragile safety can be, how evil can hide in ordinary faces, and how the absence of truth can wound deeper than any sentence ever could. And that is why stories like Sarah's must be told again and again, not to sensationalize tragedy, but to remember the child behind the headlines, to honor the families who never stop waiting, and to remind the world that awareness saves lives. If you're watching this on YouTube, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share Sarah's story. Because every view keeps her name alive, every share strengthens awareness, and every voice helps protect a child who hasn't yet been taken. Sarah Ann Wood may still be missing, but she is not forgotten. Case 2 on the morning of November 28, 1980, in Sanjo, Niigata Prefecture, Japan, a little girl named Fusako Sano was born into an ordinary family. She grew up as a happy, curious child, unaware that the world outside her small hometown could harbor darkness. Fusako's early years were filled with school, play, and family life, the simple rhythms of childhood guiding her days. At just 9 years old, she had the innocence and trust of a child who believed in the safety of her surroundings, never imagining that a single afternoon would shatter that trust forever. On November 13th, 1990, Fusako attended a school baseball game, a day like any other in her young life. But as she returned home, she vanished, Despite immediate efforts, a massive police search yielded nothing. Some authorities even speculated the involvement of North Korean operatives, a reflection of the fear and confusion that gripped her community. Yet the truth was far more terrifyingly ordinary. A man named Nobuyuki Sato, a 28-year-old unemployed man with severe mental disturbances, had kidnapped her. He forced her into his car and transported her less than 55 kilometers away, into an apartment just 200 meters from a local police substation. A horrifying irony that would make the ordeal even more chilling in retrospect. From the moment Fusako entered Sato's home, her world became a prison. She was confined to the upstairs floor, where the door was never locked, but where fear rendered escape impossible for over 9 years. At first, terror gripped her tightly. She was tied up, beaten, threatened with knives, and even stunned with a stun gun if she did not follow Sato's bizarre demands, such as recording horse races on television. He controlled every aspect of her life, cutting her hair, forcing her to wear men's clothing, and rationing her access to basic hygiene, with bathing permitted only occasionally. Food was provided 3 times a day, either instant meals or dishes cooked by Sato's mother, who lived downstairs. Fusako's confinement was total, and gradually, she accepted the cruel reality of her existence, losing the strength even to consider escape. Years passed with only the radio for company, television a rare privilege in her final year of captivity, and the outside world completely cut off. Sato's mother lived beneath Fusako's prison-like quarters, ostensibly unaware of her presence. Yet investigators later noted that she must have known something, as she reportedly purchased feminine hygiene products that would have been used by Fusako. Sato's own violent tendencies ensured that the two never had direct contact, and the young girl remained invisible to the world above, a ghost trapped in the home of her captor. The breakthrough came in January 2000, nearly a decade after Fusako's disappearance. Sato's increasingly erratic behavior prompted his 73-year-old mother to contact the local public health center repeatedly, seeking help. On January 28th, authorities finally visited the home, responding to disturbances caused by Sato himself. On that day, a 19-year-old Fusako emerged from her long confinement, weak, pale, and emaciated, identifying herself to the police. The girl who had entered Sato's apartment as a lively 9-year-old had been hollowed by years of isolation. Her body thin and fragile, her skin jaundiced from lack of sunlight, her movements tentative, almost childlike despite entering adulthood. Following her rescue, Fusako was reunited with her family, though the reunion was not without its own shock. Her mother barely recognized the daughter she had last seen a decade prior. Recovery was slow, both physically and psychologically. Fusako suffered from post-traumatic stress, struggled to adjust to social interactions, and carried the weight of nearly 10 years stolen from her life. Yet she gradually began rebuilding, finding solace in helping with her family's rice paddy, taking solitary walks, exploring photography, and reconnecting with the world she had been denied. She cultivated small joys, a driver's license, trips to local soccer games, quiet moments in nature, carefully piecing together a life once taken from her. Meanwhile, Nobuyuki Sato faced the full weight of justice. Hospitalized as mentally unstable immediately after the rescue, he was formally arrested and tried in Niigata District Court, where prosecutors meticulously avoided actions that could further traumatize Fusako. They included minor offenses, such as shoplifting, to ensure a lengthy sentence. Despite attempts by the defense to claim insanity, psychiatrists determined Sato was fit to stand trial. Sentenced to 14 years in 2002, his punishment was later briefly reduced to 11 years by the Tokyo High Court, though the Supreme Court ultimately reinstated the 14-year sentence. Sato served his time at Chiba Prison and was released in April 2015, living alone until his death around 2017. The case revealed painful failures within law enforcement. Sato had a prior violent conviction for attacking another girl in 1989, yet his name disappeared from criminal records, removing him from suspicion in Fusako's abduction. Leadership lapses saw high-ranking officers absent during critical moments, resulting in public criticism and resignations. The oversight added a bitter layer to the story, emphasizing how easily systems can fail the most vulnerable. Fusako's story, though marked by tragedy, also became one of resilience. Her life today is quieter, careful, but alive, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure unspeakable trauma. While the years of her youth were stolen, she reclaimed her life, piece by piece, embracing the world she had once been barred from. The Niigata girl confinement incident serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can hide in ordinary places, the importance of vigilance, and the extraordinary strength it takes to survive and heal from such unimaginable captivity. Case 3 on February 25, 1985, in Rosebud, a quiet outer suburb of Melbourne, Victoria, a little girl named Sherry Joy Beasley was born into a family whose love and care shaped her early years. Sherry was a lively, bright child, full of innocence and curiosity, with the kind of spirit that made her family smile even on difficult days. She spent her early childhood surrounded by her mother, her maternal and paternal grandparents, moving occasionally between their care, a routine meant to ensure her safety and nurture, yet one that would unknowingly expose her to a danger lurking close to home. By June 1991, Sherry was 6 years old, still small and trusting, unaware that the ordinary path she took in her neighborhood could bring her into the sights of someone who should never have been allowed near a child. On a day like any other, she rode her bicycle to a nearby milk bar, a short trip filled with innocence and routine. But the world shifted in a terrifying instant when Robert Arthur Selby Lowe, a Sunday school teacher, church elder, and traveling salesman, noticed her alone. Lowe, a man with a dark history of offenses against children, had apparently been observing Sherry on several previous occasions. The lack of constant supervision, a consequence of her moving between caregivers, made her vulnerable to the predator who had been waiting for the perfect opportunity. Eyewitnesses later reported seeing a middle-aged man driving a blue car with a distressed child inside, unaware that they had witnessed the abduction of Sherry. Her small frame, her trusting nature, and the familiarity of the quiet suburb made her an easy target for Lowe, who would commit acts so heinous that they would shock the entire nation. Months later, it would become clear that Lowe had acted with meticulous cruelty, kidnapping Sherry, raping her, and ultimately murdering her. Her body, tragically, was discovered 3 months later, on September 24, 1991, in a stormwater drain in an advanced state of decomposition, a silent testament to the brutality she had endured. Lowe's capture and conviction did not come immediately. Investigators had to unravel the complex web of his lies and carefully hidden crimes. One of the most crucial pieces of evidence emerged not from forensic discovery or eyewitness accounts, but from a series of therapy sessions. Lowe, grappling with marital problems and his own inner turmoil, had begun seeing a psychotherapist, Margaret Hobbs. During their sessions, he revealed inconsistencies and troubling statements about Sherry's disappearance, at times claiming not to remember where he had been on the day of her abduction, and at others suggesting police scrutiny was closing in on him. Law enforcement, recognizing the opportunity, secretly recorded portions of these sessions. Once informed, Hobbs consented to further taping, realizing that the statements Lowe made could hold the key to justice for Sherry. The recordings revealed a chilling portrait of a man attempting to construct alibis and avoid responsibility while quietly confessing the truth. Lowe spoke of his actions with unsettling detachment, admitting that he had given Sherry a ride in his car and manually strangled her. The therapist's careful documentation became central to the prosecution's case, despite objections from Lowe's defense, who argued that the recordings violated confidentiality. The court rejected this claim, prioritizing the protection of the public and ensuring that Lowe could not evade justice. In April 1992, during the course of the trial, Lowe finally admitted his guilt, confirming the horrifying details of Sherry's abduction, sexual assault, and murder. The judicial system responded with a sentence reflecting the gravity of his crimes. Life imprisonment plus an additional 15 years without parole. The courtroom, the family, and the community were left to grapple with the enormity of the tragedy, while the careful work of investigators and Hobbs ensured that justice, though delayed, was served. The aftermath of the case continued to affect all involved. Lowe maintained his claims of innocence for years, even suggesting that law enforcement had used him as a scapegoat, assertions that were met with disbelief and anger by Sherry's family and the police. Meanwhile, Hobbs, whose dedication to uncovering the truth had been crucial, began working on a book recounting her experiences, a project that was tragically interrupted by her death in a car accident in 1996. Her work was later completed and published by Andrew Rule, preserving the insights and efforts that had helped bring Lowe to justice. Lowe's life in prison was not without further controversy. Reports indicated his involvement with smuggled child pornography during his incarceration, highlighting the continued risks posed by individuals capable of such crimes. He ultimately died on November 4, 2021, closing the chapter on a life defined by criminal acts and the suffering of innocence. Sherry Joy Beasley's story, though brief in her time on Earth, left an enduring mark on her community and the nation. Memorial services continue to honor her memory, with the people of Rosebud and beyond gathering to remember a child whose life was stolen too soon. The case stands as a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk in seemingly ordinary places and the importance of vigilance, awareness, and unwavering pursuit of justice to protect the most vulnerable. Case 4 on the morning of September 8, 1992, in suburban Laurel, Maryland, Pam Basu, a 34-year-old award-winning research chemist, prepared for what should have been an ordinary day. She had packed her 2-year-old daughter, Serena, into her car seat, and they were on their way to Serena's first day of preschool. The sun had barely risen, the neighborhood quiet, the streets familiar. For Pam, the drive was routine, a small, happy moment shared with her daughter before the responsibilities of the day began. She had no way of knowing that in just a few moments, her life and the lives of those around her would be forever changed. Pam was driving her 1990 BMW through the quiet streets near her home when two strangers approached, seeking a car to steal. These men, later identified as 26-year-old Rodney Eugene Solomon and 16-year-old Bernard Eric Miller, had already been involved in criminal activity that morning, their vehicle having run out of gas, leaving them desperate and dangerous. The prosecutors later revealed that Solomon and Miller were seen roaming the neighborhood in search of a target. Their presence captured in the background of a video Pam's husband, Biswanath Basu, had taken of his wife and daughter before they left the house. That ordinary home video, intended as a simple memory of a mother and child, would become chilling evidence of the tragedy that unfolded. The attack came suddenly. Pam was forced from her car at a stop sign, her body caught in the terrifying chaos of the assault. She instinctively tried to protect her daughter, attempting to remove Serena from the car seat, but her arm became entangled in the seat belt. Solomon and Miller sped away, dragging Pam along the road for approximately 2 miles. Her desperate struggle, her pleas unheard, ended in tragedy when her body was left entangled at the fenced entrance to Wincopia Farms. Pam Basu died from the injuries sustained during the dragging, leaving a community and a family stunned by the cruelty of what had occurred. Serena, though thrown from the car by the perpetrators, was physically unharmed. Miraculously, she survived the ordeal, a small, innocent witness to the horror that had befallen her mother. She was rescued by a passing motorist, but the psychological impact of the event on the child and her family would linger far longer than any physical injuries. The Basu family, particularly Biswanath, was left to cope with the sudden, senseless loss of a wife and mother, the memory of that morning forever etched in their minds. Investigators quickly focused on Solomon and Miller. Solomon, the driver, had orchestrated the attack, demonstrating a reckless disregard for human life, while Miller, despite being only 16, actively participated in the crime, assisting in the brutal handling of both Pam and Serena. Witnesses testified that Miller had struck at something in the back seat before throwing Serena onto the roadside, underscoring the violent and deliberate nature of the crime. Both were arrested, tried, and convicted of murder and multiple other charges. Solomon was sentenced to life without parole, dying years later in 2018, while Miller received life imprisonment with the possibility of parole and remains incarcerated as of 2021. The Basu case had a profound impact beyond the immediate tragedy. Prior to this incident, the term carjacking did not even exist in Maryland. The brutality of the crime, its occurrence in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and its nationwide attention prompted the United States Congress to pass the Federal Anti-Car Theft Act of 1992, creating the first federal carjacking law. The act made it a federal crime to use a firearm or force to steal a motor vehicle transported across state lines, punishable by 15 years to life imprisonment. In addition, Maryland and several other states strengthened their carjacking statutes in direct response to the Basu attack, changing how law enforcement and the public viewed the threat of carjacking. Pam Basu's death left an indelible mark on her community and the nation. Her story, one of courage, tragedy, and the innocent life of a child caught in an unimaginable event, continues to resonate. In 2012, retired Howard County Police Sergeant James H. Lilly published Fatal Destiny, the carjacking murder of Dr. Pam Basu, detailing the investigation and the case that shook Maryland and brought attention to the need for federal carjacking laws, ensuring that the memory of Pam Basu, her life, and her tragic death would not be forgotten. Case 5 on the evening of October 7th, 1992, 9-year-old Nikki Allen set off from her grandfather's flat on her housing estate in Sunderland, England. It was around 8:30 p.m. when she began the short walk home, unaware that she would never reach her destination. When her mother, Patricia Henderson, returned home later that night, Nikki was nowhere to be seen. The disappearance triggered an immediate and desperate response from the local community, with over 100 neighbors joining in the search, combing streets, alleyways, and surrounding areas in the hope of finding the young girl safe. By the following day, grim signs of her fate began to appear. Nikki's shoes and coat were discovered outside the derelict Quayside Old Exchange building on High Street East. The growing dread was confirmed when her body was later found in the basement of the building. She had suffered 37 stab wounds, and a brick had been used to bludgeon her head, leaving the community horrified at the brutality inflicted upon such a young child. In the aftermath of Nikki's murder, suspicion quickly fell on a local man, George Heron, who lived near the Allen family home. In late 1993, Heron was brought to trial at Leeds Crown Court. Evidence against him included a knife found in his lodgings that matched the wounds on Nikki's body, along with blood splatters discovered on his clothing and shoes. Heron's sister told police that after returning home the night of the murder, he spent an unusually long time in the bathroom, washing both himself and his clothes, a behavior he had never exhibited before. Witnesses also reported seeing a man matching Heron's description at local pubs, purchasing cheese and onion crisps, which were known to be Nikki's favorite and were believed to have been used to lure her. After 3 days of questioning, Heron confessed to the murder, though he had previously denied it more than 120 times. Despite this confession, the trial ultimately collapsed when the judge ruled that Heron's taped confession was inadmissible due to what was described as heavy-handed police tactics. Heron was acquitted of the murder and was subsequently given a new identity and relocated from Sunderland. In 1994, Henderson brought a civil case against Heron, charging him with battery on a child, resulting in her death, and was awarded more than £7,000, though the money was never paid as Heron could not be traced. In May 2023, Northumbria police formally apologized to him. Despite the collapse of the Heron case, the investigation into Nikki's murder remained active. In February 2014, imprisoned serial killer Stephen Grieveson was questioned on suspicion of involvement, though he was later released without charge. In May 2016, a woman contacted Henderson claiming she had new information. She had been 12 years old at the time of Nikki's murder and was babysitting nearby. This tip prompted Henderson to call for a full reinvestigation of the case, launching an online petition demanding Northumbria police conduct a top-to-bottom review. The petition quickly garnered over 500 signatures in less than 24 hours. Henderson also reached out to Grieveson, hoping he might provide insight. By April 2017, Henderson met with Northumbria Police Chief Constable Steve Ashman and Detective Chief Inspector Lisa Thieker, who reassured her of their commitment to finding Nikki's killer. Later that year, police announced that they had successfully recovered a DNA sample from an unknown male. A major breakthrough came on April 17, 2018, when Northumbria police raided a house in Stockton, Teesside, and arrested 54-year-old David Thomas Boyd on suspicion of Nikki's murder. 2 years later, in April 2020, Henderson was contacted by another individual who claimed to hold information about the case, keeping hopes of justice alive. Boyd, who had used the aliases David Smith and David Bell at the time of the murder, was known to be 25 years old in 1992 and had been the partner of Caroline Branton, who occasionally babysat for Nikki. He had previously been convicted in March 2000 of indecently assaulting a young girl in Stockton and had admitted to harboring a pedophilic attraction toward young girls. Additionally, Boyd had a history of approaching and harassing children in County Durham in 1986. The trial of Boyd began on April 20th, 2023 at Newcastle Crown Court. The prosecution alleged that Boyd lured Nikki to a wasteland near the river, where before forcing her through a boarded-up window into the old Exchange building. Once inside, he is said to have struck her in the head with a brick, causing blunt force trauma that likely rendered her unconscious, before stabbing her repeatedly through the chest, heart, and lungs. A witness recalled hearing a loud scream around 10 p.m., helping to fix the time of the murder. Evidence presented included Boyd's DNA on Nikki's clothing, which he claimed could have been transferred innocently after spitting off his balcony. He was also familiar with the layout of the old Exchange building, having previously entered it days earlier while taking a boy to search for pigeons. During the trial, Boyd did not give evidence in his defense, and the defense argued that the case relied on circumstantial evidence and that any coincidences were innocent. The jury was informed there was no direct evidence of sexual motivation, making Boyd's prior convictions and admitted sexual interest in children legally irrelevant to the murder charge. After 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on May 12, 2023. Henderson expressed relief and vindication after a 30-year wait for justice. On May 23, 2023, Boyd was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 29 years before being eligible for parole, meaning he can apply for release on August 16, 2049. In August 2023, Henderson announced plans to sue Northumbria police for the prolonged delay in bringing Boyd to justice. While in September 2023, it was reported that the 30-year investigation would be subject to a review by either the Independent Office for Police Conduct or another police force. In October 2024, Boyd's appeal against his conviction and sentence was rejected, cementing the closure of the case after 3 decades of waiting. Case 6 Catherine Katie Beers was born on December 30th, 1982, and spent her early childhood on Long Island, New York. From the outside, her life appeared ordinary, but behind closed doors it was marked by instability and neglect. Katie lived with her mother, Marilyn Beers, and her older half-brother, John. Her biological father was never identified, and her home environment was deeply troubled. Marilyn frequently left her children in the care of family friends, particularly Katie's godmother, Linda Guillory, and Linda's husband, Salvatore. This arrangement was not temporary. It became a regular part of Katie's childhood, and it placed her in a deeply unsafe environment long before her kidnapping ever occurred. As the years passed, it became clear that the neglect Katie experienced was severe. While living with the Guilloris, both Katie and her brother were subjected to repeated abuse, something that went unnoticed for far too long. The adults who were meant to protect them failed completely. During this time, another figure entered Katie's life, John Esposito, a family friend who appeared helpful and generous. Esposito often gave gifts and attention to the children, presenting himself as trustworthy. However, behind this facade was a dangerous pattern of behavior. Esposito had a criminal history, including a 1977 arrest for the attempted abduction of a young boy, and he had already harmed Katie's brother before targeting Katie herself. On December 28, 1992, just 2 days before Katie's 10th birthday, Esposito carried out a carefully planned crime. He convinced Katie to come to his home in Bayshore, New York, promising her birthday presents. Once inside, after allowing her to play a video game, Esposito forced her into a hidden underground bunker beneath his garden. The bunker had been deliberately constructed years earlier and was accessed through a concealed tunnel hidden behind a bookcase in his home office. A heavy concrete trapdoor sealed the entrance, making escape nearly impossible. Inside, the space was small, silent, and completely cut off from the outside world. The bunker was divided into 2 areas, including a smaller, soundproof room where Katie was restrained. Esposito had installed a surveillance system to monitor her, and he later admitted that the bunker had been built specifically for her. What makes this even more chilling is that Katie later remembered playing in the dirt while Esposito was digging the bunker years before, unaware of its future purpose. Immediately after imprisoning her, Esposito forced Katie to record a false message claiming she had been taken by a stranger with a knife. He then played this recording from a public phone, attempting to mislead investigators and delay the search. When Katie was reported missing, police began a large-scale investigation. From early on, John Esposito drew suspicion. Witnesses reported that he had entered the arcade, where he claimed Katie disappeared alone, and investigators noticed that the recorded message lacked background noise, suggesting it had not been recorded during an actual abduction. Meanwhile, Katie remained trapped underground for more than 2 weeks. Esposito visited her regularly, controlling every aspect of her survival, while making it clear that he intended to keep her hidden for the rest of her life. Despite moments where Katie managed to move within the bunker, there was no way out. On January 13, 1993, after more than 16 days of captivity, Esposito finally confessed. He led police directly to the bunker beneath his garden, where officers rescued Katie alive. The discovery shocked investigators and the public alike. The existence of such a hidden structure in a residential neighborhood raised serious questions about how long Esposito had planned the crime and how close he had come to succeeding. In the aftermath, Esposito pleaded guilty to kidnapping in 1994 and was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Although additional allegations were acknowledged during sentencing, he was not formally charged beyond the kidnapping. He served his sentence at Sing Sing prison and remained incarcerated for 2 decades. In 2013, shortly after a parole hearing, Esposito was found dead in his cell from natural causes, bringing an end to his legal story but not to the impact of his crimes. Further investigation into Katie's past revealed the full extent of the failures surrounding her. Salvatore Inghilleri was convicted of sexual abuse and sentenced to 12 years in prison for crimes committed against Katie before her abduction. He later died while still incarcerated. Following her rescue, authorities removed Katie from her mother's care, placing her with foster parents in East Hampton, New York. For the first time, she experienced a stable and protective home environment. She was given anonymity and allowed to grow up away from public attention. Years later, as an adult, Katie chose to speak publicly about her experience. In 2013, she revealed that she had built a life of her own, married, raising children, and working professionally. That same year, she published a memoir detailing her survival, not just of the bunker, but of the years of neglect and abuse that preceded it. Her story stands as a powerful reminder that crimes like these do not begin with a single moment, but with repeated failures to protect the most vulnerable. Case 8 in November 1990, a quiet late autumn night settled over the Finnish town of Jarvenpää as 39-year-old Helena Marilainen spent the evening at a friend's apartment. Helena lived in nearby Riihimäki, and shortly before midnight, she decided to head home. The air was cold, the streets were mostly empty, and the town carried the stillness that comes after bars close and trains thin out. Helena walked alone to the Jarvanpah railway station, planning to take a late train back to Rihimäki, unaware that she was about to encounter a man investigators would later believe was responsible for multiple violent crimes. While waiting on the platform, Helena was approached by a dark-haired man wearing a leather jacket. He appeared calm and conversational, striking up a casual discussion about her travel plans. Helena told him she was waiting for a train to Rihimäki. The man listened, then offered her a ride in his car instead. Under normal circumstances, she may have refused, but Helena had been drinking that evening, and the offer seemed like a convenient shortcut home. Trusting him, she accepted. This single decision would place her directly in the path of extreme violence. The man's vehicle was a light-colored passenger car, not a station wagon, and appeared to be an older model, possibly a Mazda or a Datsun. Once inside the car, the man offered Helena alcoholic drinks and capsules containing an unknown substance. Helena consumed both and noticed that the driver himself was swallowing several capsules as well. As the drive continued, she became increasingly uneasy. The man appeared tense and distracted, and she noticed a child's safety seat in the back of the car, an unsettling detail that felt out of place given the circumstances. At some point during the journey, Helena fell asleep. When she woke up, she immediately realized something was wrong. The car was no longer on a paved, illuminated road leading toward Rihimäki. Instead, they were driving along a dark dirt road surrounded by dense forest. Alarmed, Helena asked the man about the route. He calmly assured her they were still heading in the right direction, dismissing her concerns. Despite his reassurance, a sense of danger settled over her as the isolation around them deepened. The car eventually stopped at a remote gravel pit, far from any main road or nearby homes. The man attempted to persuade Helena to stay in the car overnight, claiming it would be safer. Helena refused and insisted she wanted to go home immediately. At that point, the man exited the vehicle, saying he needed to urinate. Helena, also needing to relieve herself, stepped out of the car. As she squatted nearby, the man suddenly attacked her, striking the back of her head with a knife. By sheer chance, the woolen cap she was wearing absorbed much of the force, preventing a fatal injury. Stunned but conscious, Helena managed to stand and flee into the forest. Panic and adrenaline drove her forward as she ran through the darkness, branches tearing at her clothes and skin. Behind her, she heard the man mutter in frustration, saying something to the effect of "things didn't work out this time," before returning to his car and leaving the scene. Helena eventually reached a nearby house, where she collapsed and managed to alert authorities. She had survived an attempted murder. 5 months later, in April 1991, the region was shaken again. On the morning of April 17th, 28-year-old Tula Anita Lukarinen left Kelikoski Psychiatric Hospital, where she had been receiving inpatient care. She was traveling to Hirala to attend a meeting related to a custody case involving her son. Tula never arrived at the around 9 a.m. She was seen by an acquaintance in Jarvanpah, standing outside a liquor store. Later investigation confirmed she was also seen that evening in the center of Rihimäki, placing her movements disturbingly close to the area where Helena had been attacked months earlier. The following afternoon, on April 18th, a landowner in the village of Hikia, within the Hosjardi municipality, discovered Tula Lukarinen's mutilated body while inspecting storm damage in his forest caused by a powerful blizzard the night before. Police determined that she had been killed around midnight and had suffered extreme, sadistic violence. Although the exact murder location could not be confirmed, crucial evidence, including her handbag and a possible murder weapon, was found nearby, despite the blizzard that should have erased many traces. Even more disturbing was the location. Tula's body had been dragged dozens of meters from a small road into the woods, less than 100 meters from the same gravel pit where Helena Marilainen had narrowly escaped death. The geographical overlap raised immediate red flags for investigators. Two women, months apart, both connected to alcohol, late-night travel, and a secluded gravel pit near Jarvanpah. Then, in August 1993, a third woman vanished. 40-year-old Merit Hani attended a party at a restaurant called Zapata in Jarvanpah with her partner and friends. Due to her intoxication, she was denied entry by the doorman and was last seen standing alone outside the building. She was never seen again. Initially treated as a routine missing person case, the investigation shifted when her bag was discovered in a restaurant called Martina in Hyvinka. Staff reported that a drunk woman resembling Hanny had been escorted out earlier. These developments caught the attention of Finland's National Bureau of Investigation. The similarities between the cases, intoxicated women, late-night encounters, disappearances, or attacks near the same geographical corridor, and descriptions involving a dark-haired male driver offering rides, were too strong to ignore. The NBI began investigating all three cases as the work of a single offender. Extensive searches were conducted in the forested gravel pit areas south of Hikia, but no trace of Hanny was found. Despite decades passing, the investigation remains active. In 2007, the television series Katanit aired an episode on Merit Hanny's disappearance, generating dozens of new tips. Investigators specifically asked for information about a dark-haired man in Jarvanpah during the early 1990s who offered rides to women, matching Helena Marilanen's description. According to the NBI, additional undisclosed evidence links Hanty's disappearance to the earlier crimes, but details have been withheld due to the ongoing nature of the case. Searches continued as late as 2017, with authorities stating they possess information connecting Hanty's disappearance to the Hossjarvi forest areas. Investigators believe there may have been other attempted or completed attacks that were never reported. To this day, the identity of the man believed responsible remains unknown, leaving behind a chilling reminder of how chance, survival, and silence intersected in the dark forests of southern Finland. Case 9 on the evening of Thursday, August 5, 1993, Yaron Chun, a 20-year-old Israeli Defense Forces (IDF) soldier, was making his way home from his military base. Like many young soldiers at the time, Chun was hitchhiking, a common and informal practice in Israel during the early 1990s. He was standing at the Rama intersection near East Jerusalem, a location frequently used by soldiers hoping to catch a ride. At some point, a white Fiat van with Israeli license plates stopped and offered him a ride. The vehicle appeared ordinary and non-threatening, and the Israeli plates gave no immediate reason for suspicion. Chun entered the van, unaware that the people inside were Hamas militants planning an abduction. Shortly after Chun got into the vehicle, the situation escalated rapidly. According to later testimony, another Israeli soldier witnessed Chun struggling violently with 3 Palestinian men inside or near a white Fiat vehicle. This struggle strongly suggested that Chun had realized he was in danger and attempted to resist his abductors. During this struggle, Chun was shot by the militants. The shooting occurred very shortly after the abduction attempt, indicating that the plan to kidnap him alive had failed, or that the attackers decided to kill him when he resisted. The killing was not accidental. It was deliberate and immediate. Hamas later publicly claimed responsibility for the abduction and killing. At the time, Hamas was actively carrying out attacks aimed at Israeli military personnel and civilians, particularly during the tense period following the Oslo Accords, which had intensified opposition from militant groups. Before dawn the following day, Yaron Chun's body was discovered. His remains were found inside the burnt-out, charred white Fiat van in the village of Baitunya, located in the West Bank near Ramallah. The van had been set on fire in an apparent attempt to destroy evidence and delay identification. Despite the fire damage, authorities were able to identify Chun and reconstruct the events. The killing sent shockwaves through Israeli society. The image of a young soldier abducted while hitchhiking, something so routine at the time, highlighted the growing dangers soldiers faced even away from the battlefield. The case also reinforced fears about militants using Israeli license plates and civilian disguises to carry out attacks. Israeli security forces launched an investigation that eventually led to the arrest of those responsible. One of the key perpetrators identified was Fad Sabri Barhan al-Shaludi, a Hamas operative. He was convicted for his role in the murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, reflecting the severity of the crime and its terrorist nature. For many years, al-Shaluti remained in Israeli prison. However, on October 18, 2011, his sentence came to an unexpected end. As part of the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange, Israel agreed to release more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the return of captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, who had been held by Hamas in Gaza for over 5 years. Fad Sabri Barhan al-Shaluti was among those released and was sent to Gaza. His release was deeply painful for the family of Yaron Shun and for many Israelis, who viewed the exchange as a tragic reminder of unresolved losses and the long-lasting impact of terrorism. The murder of Yaron Shun remains a stark example of the dangers of targeted abductions during that period and is remembered as part of the broader history of Israeli-Palestinian violence in the early 1990s. His death also contributed to changes in military guidelines and public awareness regarding hitchhiking and personal security for soldiers. Case 10. In the quiet hours of March 27, 2000, the village of Tanjichu in Chechnya was gripped by a darkness that had little to do with the night itself. Most families slept peacefully, unaware that their lives were about to be torn apart by violence and cruelty. Elza Kungieva, an 18-year-old girl known for her warmth, laughter, and gentle spirit, was asleep in her modest home on Zarekny Lane when the stillness of the night was shattered by the sound of a rumbling armored personnel carrier approaching. Colonel Yuri Budanov, a high-ranking officer of the Russian army, had arrived with his subordinates, Sergeant Grigoriev, Sergeant Lian Sho, and Private Yegorov, on a mission that would forever stain the memory of the village. Reports suggest that Budanov was intoxicated, his judgment clouded by alcohol, yet the calculated cruelty of the events that followed would reveal a deeper, terrifying malice. Elza had grown up surrounded by her family's care. Her father, Visa Kungiev, was a protective figure who had dedicated his life to ensuring the safety and well-being of his 5 children. In a time and place marked by the chaos of the Second Chechen War, the Kungievas had managed to keep their lives relatively undisturbed, focusing on their daily routines, school, and small joys that war could not entirely erase. Elza's life was full of promise. She dreamed of a future outside the shadow of conflict. Yet her youth and innocence would soon be violently stolen. The family's home, usually a haven of warmth, would become the site of one of the most horrifying incidents in Chechnya during the war. Around 1 a.m, the armored vehicle arrived, stopping at the edge of the village with a metallic roar that awakened the Kungieva household. Visa Kungiev sensed danger immediately. Armed soldiers emerged, surrounding the house, while Budanov himself stood in the corridor, overseeing the operation with an air of authority and menace. 2 soldiers entered the bedroom where Elza slept, while others guarded the rest of the house. They first seized her younger sister, Kava, who screamed in terror. Budanov, frustrated by the child's cries, ordered her release and instead commanded that Elza be taken. The eldest daughter was dragged from her home, protesting and crying, but her pleas fell on deaf ears as she was forced into the armored vehicle and driven away. The numbers on the vehicle, 391, were later etched into the memories of witnesses as a silent testament to the crime. The journey to the military encampment was short but filled with fear and uncertainty. At around 3 a.m, Elza was brutally beaten inside the camp, sustaining multiple injuries to her face, neck, eye, and breast, inflicted by a hard, blunt object. Her life was extinguished when Budanov strangled her in what was reportedly his quarters, a violent act that left a trail of horror for those who would later see the forensic evidence. Her body was buried in a nearby forest by Budanov's subordinates under his orders in an attempt to conceal the crime. By the morning of March 28th, villagers, desperate and horrified, learned from local authorities that she had been raped and killed by drunken soldiers, confirming their worst fears. The immediate response from the military was unprecedented. Budanov was arrested swiftly, and the Kungieva family received assistance from federal forces. Her body was returned later that evening, accompanied by the promise of justice from Major General Alexander Verbitsky, who informed the family of the full brutality she had endured. Despite these gestures, the grief that consumed Vizha Kungiev and his family could not be alleviated by words or formalities. The loss of Elza was not only the loss of a beloved daughter, but an assault on the family's very sense of safety, honor, and humanity. As the investigation progressed, it became clear how methodical and violent Budanov's actions had been. Forensic examinations detailed the severe trauma Elza endured, from blunt force injuries to the strangulation that ended her life. Budanov admitted in court that he believed Elza was a sniper and that a fit of rage had overtaken him. However, despite the clear evidence of sexual assault, the authorities failed to include rape among the charges, a decision that left the family devastated. In Chechnya, the cultural understanding of honor makes rape a particularly devastating crime, not only for the victim, but for the entire family, amplifying the emotional and social consequences of such violence. Budanov was eventually convicted of kidnapping, murder, and abuse of power, receiving a 10-year prison sentence, stripped of his military rank and honors. Yet justice remained incomplete. In January 2009, Budanov was released early from prison, an act that reignited grief and outrage. On January 19, 2009, the family's attorney, Stanislav Markelov, who had been advocating to keep Budanov imprisoned, was shot dead in Moscow along with freelance journalist Anastasia Babyrova. These killings highlighted the continued danger for those pursuing justice and underscored the persistent climate of violence surrounding the case. Budanov himself met a violent end on June 10, 2011, when he was shot in central Moscow by an unidentified assailant outside a notary office. The murder was widely regarded as a contract killing, executed with precision, leaving a pistol and silencer behind in a car abandoned less than a kilometer from the scene. On May 7, 2013, Yusuf Timurkanov was convicted of Budanov's murder, claiming revenge for the death of his father during the Second Chechen War. Timurkanov later died while serving his sentence in a Siberian penal colony, closing one chapter of this long and tragic saga, though the memories of the atrocities committed remained fresh in the minds of those affected. The story of Elza Kungieva is one of unfathomable cruelty, grief, and injustice, but also a testament to the resilience of those left behind. Her life, though cut brutally short, reminds us of the human cost of war and the devastating consequences when power is abused. The Kungieva family's pursuit of justice, the failure of initial investigations, and the subsequent chain of violence that followed demonstrate how one act of brutality can ripple through years, affecting countless lives. Her story calls upon all who hear it to remember, to bear witness, and to fight for accountability, ensuring that even in the face of darkness, the truth is never forgotten. Case 11 in the summer of 2000, 16-year-old Molly Bish, born on August 2nd, 1983, had just begun a new chapter of her life, working as a lifeguard at Comins Pond in the quiet town of Warren, Massachusetts. To her friends and family, Molly seemed like any other bright, energetic teenager, full of life and eager to take on responsibility. Yet fate had other plans. On June 26th, the day before her disappearance, Molly's mother, Magi Bish, noticed something unsettling. A man with a mustache, sitting alone in a white car, parked in the lot near the lifeguard station where Molly worked. The man's presence struck Magi as suspicious, a shadow on an otherwise ordinary day, but she did not feel immediate danger and assumed it was nothing more than a passerby. The next morning, June 27th, Magi drove her daughter to Comins Pond and watched her confidently take her post by the lifeguard station. The mysterious man from the previous day was nowhere in sight, but the tension in the air was far from gone. Witnesses would later recount seeing a man who matched the stranger's description in the parking lot just minutes before Molly arrived. Even more chilling, a local worker reported spotting a similar car parked at a nearby cemetery, connected to the pond by a narrow path, a detail that would later raise troubling questions about premeditation. Magi Bish would unknowingly be the last person to see her daughter alive. Hours later, Her world would be turned upside down when the police called with alarming news. There had been no lifeguard on duty all day, and Molly's belongings had been left untouched at her station. Panic erupted as an extensive search began, but as the hours stretched into days, the sense of dread only deepened. The disappearance of Molly Bish was no ordinary missing person case. It was a chilling mystery that would grip the entire community and leave questions that haunted the town for years. In the fall of 2002, nearly 2 years after Molly Bish vanished, a glimmer of hope and dread emerged when a hunter stumbled across a small, chilling clue: a blue swimsuit hidden deep in the woods on Whiskey Hill in Palmer. Authorities immediately launched a thorough search of the area, combing the forest for any sign of the missing teenager. Then, on June 9, 2003, tragedy struck with finality. Molly's remains were discovered 5 miles from her family home, tucked away in a remote part of the Massachusetts wilderness. The passage of time had taken its toll. Decomposition made it impossible for investigators to determine an exact cause of death. Yet the evidence left little doubt. Molly Bish had been murdered. The serene woods where she once laughed and played now held the silent testimony of a young life cut cruelly short. The investigation into Molly's disappearance and death would stretch over years, pulling in leads from near and far. Yet every path seemed to lead to more questions than answers. In 2005, a Connecticut man who had been charged with attempted kidnapping in New York briefly came under scrutiny. Nothing ultimately connected him to Molly's case, but the fleeting suspicion highlighted the desperation of law enforcement to find anyone who might be responsible. For years later, in 2009, a new suspect came into focus: Rodney Stanger, a man who had lived for more than 2 decades in Southbridge, Massachusetts, just a short distance from Warren. Stanger had relocated to Florida a year after Molly's disappearance, and investigators quickly noticed disturbing connections. He had access to a white car that matched the description of the vehicle seen the day before Molly vanished. He frequented Coleman's Pond, the very site where she worked, and hunted in the same woods where her body was eventually found. Even more chilling, his appearance closely matched the man Magi Bish had described, the stranger in the white sedan whose presence had foreshadowed her daughter's abduction. Rodney Stanger's potential involvement drew the investigation into dark, interconnected cases. Authorities questioned him not only about Molly Bish, but also about the 1993 disappearance of Holly Pyranen, a girl of the same age who had gone missing in nearby Sturbridge. In a poignant twist, Molly herself had written a letter of hope to Pyranen's parents in 1993, long before she herself would vanish. Yet, despite the mounting suspicions and eerie parallels, Stanger was never charged in either case. Over time, forensic evidence shifted attention to others, and in 2012, authorities named David Pouliot, a man who had died in 2003, as a person of interest in the Pyranen case. The web of unanswered questions, suspects, and near misses painted a grim picture. Molly Bish's murder was entwined in a larger, haunting pattern, leaving investigators and her family searching desperately for justice that seemed always just out of reach. In November 2011, the investigation into Molly Bish's disappearance took a dramatic turn when Gerald Battistoni was officially named as a suspect. Battistoni was no stranger to the criminal justice system. His history was dark and violent, stretching back to 1980. In the early 1990s, he had served time for repeatedly raping a teenage girl, a crime that cast a long shadow over his life. The weight of scrutiny became unbearable after news articles identified him as a potential suspect in the deaths of both Molly Bish and Holly Pyranen, leading Battistoni to attempt suicide while in prison. Adding to the alarm, investigators discovered that Battistoni had been in the area where Molly's body was found and bore a striking resemblance to the composite sketch of the mysterious man Magi Bish had seen in the parking lot the day before her daughter vanished. In their relentless pursuit of answers, the Bish family, working alongside a private investigator, petitioned the state to conduct DNA testing, hoping modern forensic science could finally bring clarity to a case that had haunted them for over a decade. The The Massachusetts State Police sent the evidence all the way to Texas, searching for a breakthrough. Buddy Stoney would die in November 2014, leaving the case unresolved and the family with more questions than ever. Nearly a decade later, on June 3, 2021, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early announced a new person of interest, Frances Sumner. Sumner, a registered sex offender with a long criminal record, had been found dead inside his home in Spencer, Massachusetts, on May 4, 2016. Although Early did not disclose the exact nature of Sumner's connection to the case, he revealed that investigators had received new information that warranted further attention. Sumner's criminal history was severe. In 1982, he had been convicted of aggravated rape and kidnapping and sentenced to at least 9 years in prison. The revelation of another potential suspect only deepened the complexity of a case that had confounded authorities for years. Despite decades of investigation, exhaustive searches, and numerous leads, no arrests have ever been made in Molly Bish's case. Her disappearance prompted the most extensive and costly search operation in Massachusetts history, mobilizing law enforcement, volunteers, and the community in an unprecedented effort to find her. The tragedy of her story and the mystery surrounding her death has captured national attention, with her case featured on popular television programs such as Disappeared, America's Most Wanted, Unsolved Mysteries, and 48 Hours. Yet, for all the exposure and public interest, the questions linger, leaving Molly Bish's family and the nation searching for answers that remain just out of reach. As the 23rd anniversary of Molly Bish's disappearance approached in 2023, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early provided a somber yet determined update on the case. Despite the decades that had passed and the lack of any arrests, Frances Sumner, though deceased, remained a person of interest, a haunting reminder that answers might never fully arrive. Early expressed cautious optimism about the ongoing efforts of state police detectives, emphasizing the relentless testing of evidence using the latest advancements in forensic science. He highlighted the critical role of familial DNA in modern investigations and voiced strong support for legislative changes designed to facilitate its use, ensuring that technological progress could aid in solving cold cases like Molly's. Throughout it all, the Bish family remained steadfast, not only advocating for justice in their daughter's case, but also raising awareness about child abduction, striving to prevent other families from experiencing the same heart-wrenching loss. An anonymous tip line continued to stand ready for anyone with information, a beacon of hope that one day, a small detail could unlock the truth. The legacy of Molly Bish's life and the tragedy of her disappearance continues to resonate. In 2004, just a year after her remains were recovered, Magi and John Bish channeled their grief into action, founding the Molly Bish Foundation. Through this organization, they have dedicated themselves to promoting child safety, educating communities, and advocating for policies that protect vulnerable children. Though Molly's life was cruelly cut short, the foundation ensures that her story lives on, inspiring vigilance, compassion, and awareness, and keeping the hope for justice alive for her family and countless others. Case 12 Amber was the daughter of Bernie Swartz, a police officer, and Kim Swartz. Her father had tragically been shot and killed just 4 months before her birth, leaving her mother to navigate life without him. Following this loss, Kim Swartz entered a relationship with Al Garcia, and Amber took his last name. Despite the normal rhythms of childhood, a shadow loomed over Amber's life from the very beginning, a shadow that would later transform into a terrifying reality. Over the years, law enforcement investigated multiple suspects in connection with Amber's disappearance, including a volunteer who had assisted in searches for missing children and even a defrocked priest. Each lead was pursued intensively, but the truth remained elusive, leaving the community in fear and Amber's family desperate for answers. It was not until 2009 that the case finally began to take a grim shape. Pinole police, working alongside the FBI, revealed that Amber's killer was Curtis Dean Anderson, a convicted murderer with a long and violent criminal history. Anderson had died in prison in 2007, just 1 month after confessing to her kidnapping and murder. His record was chilling. He had previously been convicted of kidnapping and murdering 7-year-old Shiana Fairchild of Vallejo, California, and had also kidnapped and sexually assaulted another young girl, Mitzi Sanchez, who had miraculously escaped. Authorities learned that Anderson had even boasted about having kidnapped 11 girls in total, painting a terrifying portrait of a predator whose crimes left a trail of heartbreak, fear, and tragedy across California. During the investigation, Curtis Dean Anderson told FBI agents chilling details of Amber's final hours. He claimed that he had sedated the young girl while driving to Arizona to visit his aunt, and later said he killed her in a motel room near Tucson. Anderson then stated that he had disposed of her body near Benson, Arizona. Yet despite the horrifying confession, no human remains or other credible evidence confirming Amber's death have ever been found, leaving her fate shrouded in uncertainty. Based solely on Anderson's admission, authorities initially declared the case closed, but for Amber's mother, Kim Swartz, the confession offered little comfort. She remained convinced that Anderson was lying, perhaps seeking attention, and that the truth of what had happened to her daughter had yet to come to light. Years later, in 2013, after a determined petition campaign by advocates and family, the Pinole police agreed to reopen the case, reigniting hope that answers might finally emerge, even as the shadow of uncertainty lingered over Amber's disappearance. Case 13, Leanne Tiernan, born on September 27, 1984, was just 16 when she disappeared on the afternoon of November 26, 2000. A pupil at West Leeds High School, Leanne had spent the day shopping in Leeds City Center with her friend, 15-year-old Sarah Whitehouse. At 4:50 p.m., the girls returned to Bramley by bus and parted ways at Hoffley Lane. Whitehouse watched as Leanne set off along an unlit path through a patch of wooded wasteland known as Hoffley Gill, unaware that this would be the last time she would see her friend alive. When Whitehouse arrived home, she tried to contact Leanne by phone, only to find she was not at home. By 5:20 p.m., Leanne's mother called her mobile, but it rang repeatedly before cutting off, and a second attempt ended after just 4 rings. Alarmed, she contacted the police at 7 p.m., reporting her daughter as missing. The police responded immediately, launching a full-scale missing person inquiry under the direction of Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg. Officers scoured the area where Leanne was last seen, but found no trace of her. As the investigation unfolded, it became one of the largest ever undertaken by West Yorkshire Police, drawing in up to 200 officers and hundreds of volunteers. The community joined in the desperate search, and every hour that passed intensified the fear that Leanne might be in grave danger. The case, already shrouded in uncertainty and dread, marked the beginning of a harrowing investigation that would grip the nation for months to come. The search for Leanne Tiernan quickly escalated into a massive and unprecedented operation. Police carried out more than 1,400 house-to-house inquiries, meticulously questioning residents for any information. Around 800 houses along what was designated as the Red Route, the path Leanne was believed to have taken, were searched alongside 800 sheds, garages, and outbuildings, as well as 150 commercial premises within a half-mile radius of Hoffley Gill. DNA samples were collected from 140 men interviewed in connection with the investigation, and 12 search warrants were executed across various addresses and leads. The West Yorkshire Police Underwater Search Unit scoured a 3-mile section of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal between Spring Garden Lock and Bramley Falls, draining 2 miles to a depth of 1 meter, while also inspecting 32 drain shafts. Yorkshire Water was called in to help locate disused and abandoned drains and wells, leaving no stone unturned in the desperate search for clues. The scale of the inquiry extended beyond conventional methods. Collections of household waste were temporarily halted so police could examine every bin in the area for evidence. Assistance poured in from a wide range of organizations, including British Waterways, the British Transport Police, the Ministry of Defence's Aerial Reconnaissance Department, Calder Valley Search and Rescue Team, Interpol, and the Police National Search Center, a joint police and military facility. On December 3, 2000, detectives staged a reconstruction of Leanne's final movements, with her friend Sarah Whitehouse and older sister Michelle reenacting her route in the hope of triggering memories in witnesses who might have seen her. Text messages were even sent to Tiernan's mobile phone, briefly activated on November 27th, in a bid to gather any trace of activity. Public support was immense. A local businessman offered a £10,000 reward for information leading to her safe return, and supermarket chain Iceland printed her photo and details on milk cartons across the country, a haunting reminder of the nation's growing fear and the urgency to find the missing teenager. As the search for Leanne Tiernan dragged on, hope began to fade. There were unconfirmed reports of sightings stretching as far away as Doncaster and Blackpool, but 9 months passed without a single verified trace of the missing teenager. Her boyfriend, 19-year-old care assistant Wayne Keeley, pleaded desperately for any word from Leanne, sending messages of hope into the void, praying for a sign that she was still alive. On December 4th, 2000, police released an EFIT facial composite of a man spotted walking a dog in the Hoffley Gill area just before Leanne disappeared. The description painted a chilling image. Approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, stocky in build, with a round, reddish face that might have been scarred. Witnesses said he wore a black woolen hat, a 3/4-length waterproof jacket, and dirty jeans. The composite added a new layer of urgency and dread to the investigation, suggesting that someone had been watching the area, and perhaps Leanne herself, in the moments before her disappearance. Every detail fueled the fear that the girl had fallen into the hands of a dangerous predator, leaving the community on edge and the police racing against time. On August 20th, 2001, a chilling discovery was made in Linley Woods, North Yorkshire. Mark Bisson, walking his 2 dogs, stumbled upon a grim sight. Leanne Tiernan's body, just 100 yards from the spot where another murder victim, Yvonne Fitt, had been found buried 9 years earlier. Identification was confirmed 2 days later on August 22nd, when detectives matched her fingerprints. Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg immediately announced that the inquiry had now escalated into a murder investigation, codenamed Operation Conifer. The scene horrified investigators. Leanne's body had been meticulously concealed, wrapped inside 9 green plastic bin bags secured with twine. Around her head was a black bin bag fastened with a leather dog collar, and the entire bundle had been placed inside a floral patterned duvet cover, suggesting a disturbing level of premeditation. Many of Leanne's belongings, including her LS coat and black boots, were never recovered. Plastic cable ties had been cruelly used to strangle her, while additional ties bound her hands. A dark-colored scarf was wrapped tightly around her neck, yet her hair remained tied in a neat ponytail, held in place by the same hairbands and clips she had worn on the day she vanished. The state of decomposition led forensic experts to a chilling conclusion. Leanne may have been kept in cold storage or a freezer for weeks after her death, possibly both to avoid detection and as a horrific trophy. Cryobiologist specialists examined the microstructure of her cardiac tissue, confirming that freezing could have preserved her body for a significant period, even accounting for seasonal air temperatures between her disappearance and the discovery of her remains. Police issued a public appeal, urging anyone who had been in Linley Woods recently or who knew of others who frequented the area to come forward with information. The methodical concealment, combined with the previous history of violent crime in the same location, painted a terrifying portrait of a predator with both cunning and a disturbing obsession with control. The discovery of Leanne's body marked a tragic turning point in the case, transforming fear and uncertainty into the grim reality of murder, and setting the stage for a painstaking hunt for her killer. John Taylor, born on August 27, 1956, in Leeds, West Riding of Yorkshire, seemed to blend seamlessly into his community. A parcel delivery worker for Parcel Force, he lived on the same housing estate as Leanne Tiernan, just a mile from the area where she was last seen alive. Locally, he was known as the Pet Man, a quiet figure who kept several dogs and ferrets, sold pet food, and was even recognized as a poacher. His only criminal record, a theft of a suit at the age of 15, appeared minor, and neighbors considered him trustworthy and entirely ordinary, unaware of the darkness beneath his unassuming exterior. However, following police appeals for information, Taylor's name surfaced from an unexpected source. Two former girlfriends, both of whom had met him through Lonely Hearts columns, independently told investigators that he had driven past the woods where Leanne disappeared and boasted about poaching there, hinting at a sinister connection to the crime that had gone unnoticed by the unsuspecting community. As police delved deeper into John Taylor's life, a far darker side began to emerge. Investigators discovered that he was a frequent user of Lonely Hearts advertisements, a method he had used to meet women over the years. By examining his telephone records, detectives identified the women he had contacted and began interviewing them, uncovering chilling revelations. One woman, who had dated Taylor, disclosed that he had told her he enjoyed tying women up and locking them in cupboards. Another revealed that Taylor had confessed to a fetish for bondage, whips, and ties, even going so far as to say he wanted to tie up her daughter with cable ties and engage in sexual acts. A former girlfriend, who had briefly lived with Taylor, added more horrifying details. She told police that she had often visited Lindley Woods with him during their relationship, but had eventually ended the relationship due to his extreme bondage fetish and the persistent feeling of being violated. When asked to describe his methods, she explained that Taylor would secure a plastic cable tie around each of her wrists and then use a third tie to bind her hands behind her back. This method was a chilling mirror of how Leanne Tiernan had been found, a direct link between his sexual compulsions and the brutal crime. She also revealed that Taylor kept a bundle of cable ties in a drawer next to his bed, tools of control and obsession that he had collected long before his final act. Two other women corroborated the disturbing pattern, stating that Taylor had tied their hands and even bound their breasts with cable ties during sexual encounters. The testimonies painted a terrifying portrait of a man whose private obsessions had escalated to deadly extremes, leaving detectives with a clear picture of the predator they were hunting. The forensic investigation into Leanne Tiernan's murder revealed a meticulous and terrifying picture of John Taylor's involvement. One of the most striking pieces of evidence was the leather dog collar found around Leanne's neck. Manufactured by a company in Nottingham, it had been sold to 220 wholesalers across the country. Detective Constable David Wilson painstakingly contacted each one, searching for records of sales in the Leeds area. On the 112th attempt, a Liverpool-based mail-order company called Pet's Pajamas confirmed 3 sales in the region, and John Taylor's name appeared on the list. This immediately drew the attention of investigators, as Taylor had already been mentioned during appeals following Detective Superintendent Gregg's public call for information. Further forensic analysis reinforced the case against Taylor. Scientists at the Forensic Science Service, FSS, examined the dark scarf tied around Leanne's neck and discovered a hair caught in a knot that did not belong to her. While conventional DNA testing failed to yield results from the hair's root, mitochondrial DNA testing within the shaft produced a match to Taylor, providing a chilling genetic link. Examination of the twine used to bind Leanne revealed it was of a rare type manufactured only by a company in Devon, typically supplied to the Ministry of Defense. A small one-off batch had been sold publicly for use as rabbit catch nets, and this exact twine was later found in Taylor's home. The yellow cable ties used to restrain Leanne were traced to an Italian manufacturer, 99% of whose products were sold to the Royal Mail, of which Taylor's employer Parcelforce was a subsidiary. Identical cable ties were recovered from Taylor's residence. Green plastic pieces identical to that used to wrap her body were also found in his home. Perhaps most disturbingly, red nylon carpet fibers were discovered on Leanne's clothing, distinctive due to the unusual dye pattern. Taylor had recently removed all carpeting from his house and burned it, yet small traces matching those on Leanne's body were found caught on nails in the floorboards. Finally, a forensic pollen expert confirmed that Leanne had been in Taylor's garden just before her murder based on the unique types of pollen found in her nasal cavity, on her skin, and in her hair. Each discovery built an unbreakable chain, methodically linking the seemingly ordinary man next door to the horrifying crime that had shocked the nation. On October 16, 2001, John Taylor, who had been living alone since his divorce in 1996, was finally arrested on suspicion of murder. From the moment police arrived, the scene was treated with the utmost urgency and precision. Taylor's house and gardens were immediately sealed off, along with a patch of wasteland behind the property. Over the next 10 days, investigators conducted a painstaking search of the entire property, including 3 large chest freezers, digging through soil, examining every corner, and leaving no potential hiding place unchecked. The operation was methodical, painstaking, and tense, as detectives knew that uncovering even the smallest piece of evidence could make or break the case. During police interviews, Taylor made chilling statements, claiming that he had picked Leanne up by the scarf around her neck and that she had died accidentally. He insisted that in a moment of panic, he had hidden her body in Lindley Woods. But investigators and prosecutors rejected his account, arguing that the evidence told a far darker story. They maintained that Taylor had bound Leanne's hands behind her back with cable ties in his bedroom, preparing her for sexual assault, and had used another cable tie as a ligature to strangle her when her blindfold slipped and she saw his face. When questioned about his motive, Taylor simply replied, "I have no idea," offering nothing to explain the horror he had inflicted. When police confronted him about inconsistencies in the timeline, he added more disturbing claims. That he had first hidden Leanne's body beneath pallets in his back garden, and later stored her inside his sofa, seemingly trying to cover his tracks while providing a glimpse into the cold, calculated steps he had taken to conceal his crime. The arrest marked the beginning of the end for Taylor, but it also revealed the terrifying lengths he had gone to in order to commit and conceal the murder, leaving investigators and the public stunned by the methodical brutality of his actions. On February 15th, 2002, John Taylor appeared before Mr. Justice Poole at Leeds Crown Court, facing the gravity of his crimes. He entered a guilty plea for the abduction of Leanne Tiernan, but a plea for the murder charge was deferred pending a separate Newton hearing, leaving the court and the public tense with anticipation. Taylor was remanded in custody, the shadow of his actions looming over every hearing. On July 8th, 2002, the trial officially began, and Taylor finally entered a guilty plea to the murder of Leanne Tiernan. The courtroom was heavy with emotion, the family's grief palpable, as the judge, Mr. Justice Astle, delivered a searing condemnation of Taylor's actions. After outlining the facts, Justice Astle addressed Taylor directly, his voice carrying the weight of the law and moral outrage. "After the death of this girl at your hands, you sought sexual gratification with a girl of similar age. That not only demonstrates how dangerous you are, but shows your complete lack of remorse. This was not a chance encounter. You deliberately chose a secluded location and a vulnerable young girl who suited your purpose. Your actions were as cold and calculating as can be imagined. You are a dangerous sexual sadist. The suffering you caused Leanne and the ongoing suffering inflicted on those who loved her cannot be measured. You must expect to spend the rest of your life in custody." Taylor was sentenced to the mandatory term of life imprisonment, though the minimum term was later set at 20 years by Lord Wolfe, meaning that while he would remain behind bars for decades, he was not issued a whole life tariff reserved for the most irredeemable offenders. Until November 2002, the Home Secretary had the power to determine parole eligibility, but a legal challenge shifted that authority entirely to the judiciary. At the conclusion of the trial, Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg warned the public and investigators alike, "We do not believe that this is the first major crime he has committed. The level of premeditation in this murder, the way he concealed and disposed of the body, suggests a calculated pattern. We cannot exclude the possibility he has killed before." The words sent a shiver through all who heard them, a chilling reminder that Taylor's crimes were not just acts of impulse, but the deeds of a carefully scheming predator. Once John Taylor's DNA profile was secured, investigators revisited unsolved sex attacks in the Leeds area, searching for other crimes that might be linked to him. 2 particularly brutal rapes stood out, both committed on the same estate where Taylor lived, exposing a pattern of predatory behavior that had gone undetected for years. The first occurred on October 18th, 1988, when a 32-year-old woman was ambushed while walking across Hoffley Gill to collect her children from school. Taylor, masked and armed with a knife, forced her to perform oral sex before raping her. Less than 5 months later, on March 1st, 1989, he struck again. This time, he broke into the home of a 21-year-old woman in broad daylight. Masked and wielding a knife, he forced her into the bedroom, blindfolded and gagged her, and then compelled her to perform oral sex before raping her, while her small child remained in the house. In October 2002, Taylor was formally rearrested and charged with both rapes. Initially uncooperative, he eventually pleaded guilty on February 4th, 2003, at Leeds Crown Court, confronted with DNA evidence that left no room for doubt. Judge Norman Jones QC, the recorder of Leeds, sentenced him to 2 additional life terms, expressly removing the possibility of early release. Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg warned that other victims might still exist, revealing that a diamante necklace found in Taylor's car at the time of his 2001 arrest could belong to yet another unknown victim. Investigators noted that Taylor had traveled widely, both through his parcel delivery work and personal ads, suggesting a potential 2-decade history of sexual predation. The evidence dismantled Taylor's claim that Leanne Tiernan's murder was an isolated incident, painting the portrait of a serial sex attacker who had operated in secrecy for years. Even decades later, Taylor continued to face justice. On October 26, 2018, he was handed a whole life order for a series of other rapes and sexual assaults, ensuring that he would almost certainly never leave prison. The scale of his crimes, the meticulous forensic work, and the relentless pursuit of justice revealed a predator whose hidden life of violence had left a trail of trauma across the country, confirming the nightmare that Tiernan's murder was part of a far broader, terrifying pattern. Under the Criminal Justice Act of 2003, John Taylor's life sentence for the murder of Leanne Tiernan was reviewed to determine the minimum term he would serve before being eligible for parole. On December 19, 2006, Mr. Justice Openshaw set the minimum term at 30 years, a ruling that reinforced the severity of Taylor's crimes, while leaving the door open for ongoing judicial scrutiny. In delivering his judgment, Justice Openshaw was careful to clarify the full weight of the sentence. I am anxious that this sentence is not misunderstood or misreported. The sentence is, and remains, a sentence of imprisonment for life. The defendant may not even be considered for release for this offense of murder until he has served at least 30 years. That is not to say that he will then be released, for the whole life term imposed for the rapes remains in force. Furthermore, the defendant will be detained unless and until the parole board is satisfied that he no longer presents a risk to the public. Many prisoners, and surely John Taylor is likely to be one, are in fact detained for many years after their tariff has expired. Indeed, it may be that he presents such a risk that he could never safely be released. The judge emphasized that the minimum term did not guarantee release. Taylor would remain under strict supervision for the rest of his life, reflecting the extreme danger he posed. Today, John Taylor remains incarcerated at HM Prison Wakefield, a maximum security facility where he will spend the majority, if not the entirety, of his life behind bars. The sentence stands as a stark reminder of the calculated, sadistic nature of his crimes and the enduring impact of his actions on the family of Leanne Tiernan and the wider community. Case 14 on the afternoon of March 21st, 2002, 13-year-old Amanda J. Millie Dowler left Heathside School in Weybridge, Surrey, at precisely 3:07 p.m., walking alongside a friend toward Weybridge railway station. The girls boarded a train to Walton-on-Thames, one stop shy of Millie's usual stop in Hersham, and stopped to eat at the station cafe. At 3:47 p.m., Millie phoned her father, promising she would be home in half an hour, her voice calm and unaware of the danger approaching. By 4:05 p.m., the girls left the cafe, and Millie continued home alone. She was last seen just 3 minutes later, walking along Station Avenue, spotted by a friend of her sister waiting a nearby bus stop. Despite being captured by a closed-circuit television camera further along the road, Millie was never seen on film again. Hours later, Reddiwunexia, was photographed passing the same location at 4:32 p.m. The car belonged to Emma Mills, the girlfriend of Levi Belfield, who would later confess in a 2009 interview that he had been driving the vehicle that afternoon. The timeline, precise yet ominous, paints a chilling picture of a young girl's last moments of freedom before she vanished, marking the beginning of a case that would grip the nation and haunt her family for years. When Millie Dowler failed to return home that evening, alarm bells rang immediately. At 7 p.m., her worried parents reported her missing to the police, setting off a nationwide search that would captivate and horrify the public. Over 100 officers scoured the fields, streets, and rivers around Hersham, supported by helicopters sweeping the area from above. Detectives who had previously investigated the high-profile abduction of Sarah Payne were brought in to assist, bringing experience but no certainty to the desperate hunt. The Dowler family made countless public appeals, hoping someone, anywhere, might have seen their daughter. A dramatic reconstruction of her last known movements was broadcast on BBC's Crime Watch UK, urging witnesses to come forward. And even Pop Idol winner Will Young added his voice to the plea, highlighting the national attention Millie's disappearance had garnered. The Crime Watch appeal went further, addressing Millie directly, suggesting she might have run away rather than fallen victim to an abductor or murderer. Her mother clung to that faint hope, though she admitted she could not imagine a reason for her daughter to leave home willingly. The press later reported that Dowler had, in the past, written a mock leaving home letter and notes indicating periods of unhappiness, but nothing pointed to an actual plan to vanish. These fragments of possibility only added to the agonizing uncertainty. As the nation watched and waited for any sign of Millie, a young girl caught between innocence and a shadow of unimaginable danger. A week after Millie Dowler vanished, the police began to reveal the unsettling contours of the investigation. They stated that it was increasingly unlikely she had been taken by force. While this suggested she may have willingly entered the home or vehicle of someone she knew, the lack of any witnesses to a struggle only deepened the mystery. Despite multiple reported sightings of Millie in the hours before she disappeared, no one could confirm seeing her in danger, leaving her family and investigators with the haunting possibility that she had been lured away by someone familiar. On April 23, 2002, hope and fear briefly surged when a body was discovered in the River Thames. The media speculated it might be Millie, sending waves of anxiety across the nation. The next day, however, the grim reality set in. The body belonged to 73-year-old Maisie Thomas, missing since March 2001, whose death was deemed non-suspicious. As the months passed, the search continued with urgency. National tabloid The Sun offered a £100,000 reward. Police and family tirelessly scoured the area, and Millie's parents even sent text messages to her mobile in desperate hope of a reply. Yet by June 2002, grim word from the authorities shattered any remaining hope. Police told her parents that Millie was probably dead, turning a nationwide search into a tense and tragic investigation of abduction and murder. On September 18, 2002, nearly 6 months after Millie Dowler disappeared, mushroom pickers stumbled upon human remains deep in the undergrowth of Yateley Heath Woods, near Yateley, Hampshire. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Dental records later confirmed the worst fears. The remains belonged to Millie. The state of decomposition was severe, making it impossible for investigators to determine the exact cause of death. Even more haunting, none of the belongings she had carried that day, her purse, rucksack, or mobile phone, were ever recovered. With this grim confirmation, Surrey police officially reclassified the case as a homicide investigation, launching a major inquiry codenamed Operation Ruby. In the months that followed, the investigation intensified. On November 22, 2002, police established a roadblock near the site where the body had been found, stopping and questioning some 6,000 motorists in the area. Despite the exhaustive effort, no viable leads emerged. Early on, suspicion briefly fell on Millie's father, a common practice in missing person cases, though this was later acknowledged as a misstep, with police issuing apologies for the distress it caused. In March 2003, forensic investigators discovered the DNA of an unidentified male on one of Millie's items of clothing in her bedroom, hinting chillingly that her killer may have encountered her before the abduction. However, this lead, along with a potential link to a church robbery in Sunderland, was ruled out within 3 months, leaving the case with yet more questions than answers and a family desperate for justice. Even after Millie Dowler's tragic death was confirmed, the investigation faced a relentless wave of interference and false leads that only deepened the anguish for her family. Paul Hughes, already imprisoned for indecently assaulting a 12-year-old girl, sent threatening letters to Millie's sister, claiming he had killed Millie and vowing to take her life next. For this, Hughes was convicted of making death threats and sentenced to 5 years in prison, while the prison service faced criticism and issued an apology for failing to screen his mail effectively. Meanwhile, Leon Newman, from Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire, repeatedly phoned the Dowler family, pretending to be Millie herself. In April 2003, she was jailed for 5 months after pleading guilty to 5 counts of making calls intended to cause distress. The harassment did not end there. Gary Farr from Retford, Nottinghamshire, bombarded Millie's parents, friends, and police officers with emails, claiming Millie was still alive and had been smuggled abroad to work in nightclubs in Poland. By October 2006, Farr was deemed a serious psychological danger and was sectioned indefinitely under the Mental Health Act. As the official investigation pressed on, hopes of uncovering physical evidence were repeatedly dashed. In March 2008, an unnamed man was briefly arrested in connection with the disposal of a car linked to the case, but he was released later the same day. Then, in October 2009, police conducted a meticulous search of Bedfont Lakes Country Park in West London, aiming to recover the red Daewoo Nexia that had been seen near the time of Millie's disappearance. Yet, the car remained elusive, along with any evidence that could reignite the investigation. The vehicle has still never been found, leaving a haunting mystery that continues to linger over the case. On February 25, 2008, Surrey police revealed that Levi Belfield had become their prime suspect in the long-unsolved murder of Millie Dowler. The announcement came after Belfield's shocking convictions for the murders of 2 young female students and the attempted murder of a third, which immediately put him under intense scrutiny. Authorities stated they were very interested in questioning him about Millie's disappearance, signaling a major breakthrough in a case that had haunted investigators and her family for years. Then, on March 30th, 2010, Belfield was formally charged with the abduction and murder of Millie Dowler, prompting the adjournment of her inquest as the investigation shifted focus entirely to building a solid case against him. On October 6, 2010, Belfield appeared in court via video link, already serving 3 life sentences for his previous violent crimes, and was formally charged in connection with Millie's murder. His trial finally began on May 10, 2011 at the Central Criminal Court before Mr. Justice Wilkie, drawing intense media attention. Over the following weeks, the prosecution presented a detailed and compelling case, culminating on June 23, 2011, with the jury delivering a guilty verdict. The next day, Belfield was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the trial judge recommending a whole life tariff, in line with the sentences for his prior murders. Another separate trial concerning Belfield's attempted abduction of 11-year-old Rachel Cowles was abandoned due to prejudicial media coverage, but the charge remained on file, a grim reminder of the broader pattern of his predatory behavior. In the aftermath of Levi Belfield's conviction, the story of Millie Dowler's tragic murder, the relentless investigation, and the eventual trial became the focus of a special Crime Watch program, titled Taken: The Millie Dowler Story, which aired on BBC One on June 30th, 2011. The program offered a deeply detailed exploration of the case, featuring interviews with witnesses, investigators, and, most poignantly, Dowler's grieving family. Viewers were taken step by step through the painstaking work that ultimately led to Belfield's arrest, including reconstructions based on court transcripts that depicted how investigators believed the horrifying crime had unfolded. The broadcast served as both a memorial to Millie and a testament to the dedication of the police in piecing together every fragment of evidence over years of tireless work. Years later, the case saw another shocking development. On January 27, 2016, Surrey police announced that Belfield had admitted to the abduction, rape, and murder of Millie Dowler during a police interview triggered by a separate arrest in the ongoing investigation. His confession appeared to confirm the worst fears of investigators and Millie's family, leading police to release the individual initially arrested without charge. However, the situation took another twist when, on February 12, 2016, Belfield dramatically recanted his confession, claiming that he had never admitted to killing Millie. This reversal added another layer of frustration and tension for the authorities and kept the haunting details of the case firmly in the public eye, highlighting the challenges in securing closure even after a conviction. The conclusion of Levi Belfield's trial brought little relief to the Dowler family, who voiced profound frustration over the emotional toll the proceedings had taken. Gemma, Millie's sister, described the day that her parents faced cross-examination by Belfield's defense team as the worst day of my life, capturing the intensity of the ordeal. Outside the Old Bailey, Millie's mother spoke candidly to reporters, painting a vivid picture of the trial's strain on the family. For us, the trial has been a truly awful experience. We have had to hear Millie's name defamed in court. She has been portrayed as an unhappy, depressed young girl. The Millie we knew was a happy, vivacious, fun-loving girl. Our family life has been scrutinized and laid open for everyone to inspect. We've had to lose our right to privacy and sit through day after harrowing day of the trial in order to get a man convicted of this brutal murder. The lengths the system goes to protect his human rights seems so unfair compared to what we as a family have had to endure. Bob Dowler, Millie's father, spoke of the unique anguish caused by Belfield's refusal to give evidence or appear for sentencing, emphasizing the mental strain the family endured. He said, "My family's had to pay too high a price for this conviction. The trial has been a truly mentally scarring experience on an unimaginable scale. You had to have been there to truly understand." During our questioning, my wife and I both felt as if we were on trial. We despair of a justice system that is so loaded in favor of the perpetrator of the crime. The case sparked wider discussions on the protection of victims and witnesses during high-profile court proceedings. Chief Constable Mark Rowley, who led the investigation, joined the Director of Public Prosecutions in advocating for reforms, noting the striking contrast between the public scrutiny the Dowler family faced and the protections often granted to celebrities and footballers through super injunctions. Rowley described it as a most bizarre and distressing coincidence that the family's privacy had been destroyed during the trial. Justice Secretary Kenneth Clark, however, rejected calls for a systemic review. He stressed that while Belfield had a known history of violent crimes, he still had to be considered innocent until proven guilty in court, and that measures have been necessary to prevent prejudicing the trial. Evidence of Belfield's obsession with schoolgirls and attempts to procure sex from them was therefore excluded, illustrating the delicate balance courts must strike between fair trial rights and the emotional well-being of victims' families. In 2011, it emerged that journalists from the News of the World, along with the newspaper's private investigator Glenn Mulcair, had accessed Millie Dowler's voicemail. Scotland Yard discovered that some messages had been deleted during this time, potentially destroying crucial evidence. Because her voicemail was full, the journalists cleared space for new messages they could listen to, unintentionally giving Dowler's family and friends the false hope that she was still alive. Later reports clarified that Dowler's phone automatically deleted messages 72 hours after they were listened to, further complicating the situation. The Dowler family announced their intention to pursue damages against the News of the World. By September 2011, they were reported to have been offered £2 million in personal damages. Investigations later revealed that Surrey police and other forces had known soon after Dowler's death that the newspaper staff had accessed her voicemail, but took no action. A senior Surrey officer even invited the staff to a meeting to discuss the case. These events were later portrayed in the 2025 ITV drama The Hack, which explored the phone hacking scandal. In response to Millie's tragic death, her parents, Sally and Bob Dowler, established a charity called Millie's Fund on the day of her memorial service. The charity focused on promoting public safety, particularly for children and young people, providing guidance to teenagers, youth workers, and educators. Its work included the Teach Your Mom 2TXT campaign, encouraging communication between children and parents via text messaging, complete with a glossary for commonly used SMS abbreviations. The campaign was recognized for excellence, receiving the Best Use of Mobile for Accessibility award at the 2004 GSM Association Awards. Millie's Fund also commissioned a 5-part soap opera, Watch Over Me, designed to promote personal safety for teenagers, which was distributed to schools across the UK. In 2005, the charity was transferred to the Susie Lampley Trust and officially wound up. That same year, a garden at the Hampton Court Palace Flower Show, created in Dowler's memory by Penny Smith with support from Surrey Police and Millie's Fund, won the Tudor Rose Award, the show's highest honor. A Magenta Sweet Pea was also named after Millie and made publicly available. The investigation that ultimately led to Levi Bellfield's arrest was dramatized in the 3-part 2019 television series Manhunt, with Martin Clunes portraying Colin Sutton, the detective in charge of the case. Case 15, the Soham murders, were a tragic double-child murder that took place in Soham, Cambridgeshire, England, on August 4, 2002. The victims, 10-year-old Holly Marie Wells and Jessica Amy Chapman, were lured into the home of local resident and school caretaker Ian Kevin Huntley, who murdered them, likely by asphyxiation, and disposed of their bodies in an irrigation ditch near RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk. Their bodies were discovered on August 17, 2002. On the morning of August 4th, at 11:45 a.m., Jessica Chapman left her home on Brook Street, Soham, to attend a barbecue at the home of her best friend, Holly Wells, in nearby Red House Gardens. She intended to give Holly a necklace engraved with the letter H that she had purchased during a recent family holiday to Menorca. The two girls, along with their friend Natalie Parr, spent about half an hour playing computer games and listening to music before Parr returned home. By 3:15 p.m., Holly and Jessica had changed into distinctive Manchester United football shirts, one belonging to Holly and the other to her older brother Oliver. At 5:04 p.m., Holly's mother took a photograph of the girls before they had dinner with other guests, after which they went back upstairs to continue playing. Between 5:11 p.m. and 5:32 p.m., they were known to have browsed the internet and sent several emails. At around 6:05 p.m., Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman left the Wells residence without telling anyone, intending to buy sweets from a vending machine at the nearby Ross Pier Sports Center. On their way back to 4 Red House Gardens, the girls passed the home of Ian Huntley at 5 College Close. Huntley, the senior caretaker at the local secondary school, lured the girls into his house by claiming that his girlfriend, Maxine Carr, who was also the girls' teaching assistant at St. Andrew's Primary School, was at home. In reality, Carr was visiting her mother in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. The exact events that followed inside Huntley's home remain unknown. However, investigators later determined that portions of Huntley's statements to the media before his arrest and his trial testimony, such as him cleaning his dog as the girls passed his house around 6:30 p.m. and one girl having a mild nosebleed, may have been accurate. The cause of death for both girls was subsequently ruled to be asphyxiation. Jessica Chapman's Nokia 6110 mobile phone was switched off at 6:46 p.m., marking the last known point of contact. At 8 p.m., Nicola Wells entered her daughter Holly's bedroom to invite the girls to say goodbye to her guests, only to discover that both children were missing. Panic quickly set in as she and her husband, Kevin, conducted a frantic search of their home and the surrounding streets, calling out for their daughters and checking every corner of the property. As the minutes ticked by, the reality of the situation became increasingly alarming. When Holly's 8:30 p.m. curfew had passed without any sign of the girls, Nicola Wells contacted the Chapman family to ask whether Jessica had arrived home. It was then that Leslie and Sharon Chapman revealed their growing concern that their youngest daughter had not returned. By 9:55 p.m., with both sets of parents desperate and fearful, the girls were formally reported missing to Soham police, setting in motion what would become one of the largest and most intensive missing person investigations in the United Kingdom. Within hours, Cambridgeshire police mobilized a massive search operation. Over 400 officers were assigned full-time to locate the girls, while hundreds of local volunteers joined the efforts to search every field, pathway, and residential street in the town. Officers conducted systematic house-to-house inquiries, speaking with residents, collecting witness statements. U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at nearby bases assisting in the effort, scanning woodland areas, culverts, and other potential hiding places. Every scrap of information was meticulously recorded, and officers worked around the clock in teams to comb through the town and its outskirts. To assist in public appeals for information, the police released a photograph taken by Nicola Wells less than 2 hours before the girls disappeared. The image, showing Holly and Jessica in their Manchester United replica football shirts, became the face of the investigation. Detailed physical descriptions accompanied the photograph. Both girls were white, approximately 4 feet 6 inches, 137 centimeters, in height and slim in build. Jessica Chapman was described as tanned, with shoulder-length brown hair, while Holly Wells was fair-skinned with blonde hair. The police emphasized the urgency of locating the girls quickly, warning that time was critical. Both families reported that the girls had been raised to exercise caution with strangers. They had been warned from an early age never to engage with anyone unfamiliar, advice which they had taken seriously. This sentiment was echoed by the head teacher of St. Andrew's Primary School, who told reporters that the dangers posed by strangers were something we have impressed upon the children from an early age, highlighting that the girls' abduction represented a shocking breach of the safety measures instilled in them. Authorities encouraged residents to report any suspicious activity, emphasizing that even small details could be vital in tracing the girls' movements. As the night progressed, the investigation intensified. Officers set up roadblocks, questioned commuters, and tracked vehicles leaving Soham. Volunteers scoured parks, woods, and waterways, while police worked to establish a timeline of the girls' last known movements. Every call, sighting, or report from residents was treated with utmost urgency, with officers coordinating search grids, mapping potential routes the girls could have taken, and cross-referencing sightings. The atmosphere in the town was tense. The community, though small, rallied together, distributing flyers and assisting police wherever possible. Local businesses, shops, and transport hubs were alerted, and leaflets with the girls' photographs and descriptions were widely circulated. Despite the exhaustive measures, the hours and days following the disappearance were marked by uncertainty. Each lead was pursued, no matter how minor, with detectives working tirelessly to reconstruct the girls' movements from the time they left the Wells home. Every detail mattered, from the girls' clothing to their behavior patterns and social interactions that day. The police reminded the public to remain vigilant, stressing that any sighting, however fleeting, could be the key to finding Holly and Jessica alive. The operation became a race against time, with families, friends, and officers united in a desperate bid to locate the missing girls before tragedy struck. The small town of Soham remained tense as the search for Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman continued. On August 7th, the community held a candlelight vigil, gathering in the fading evening light to show support and hope for the safe return of the children. Families, friends, and neighbors stood together, their faces illuminated by flickering candles, sending silent messages of care and concern into the night. The following day, CCTV footage captured the girls shortly before their disappearance, showing them arriving at the local sports center at 6:28 p.m. For storytelling purposes, this footage can be represented by a gentle black screen, with narration guiding viewers through the timeline and movements of the children without displaying graphic visuals. The footage allowed the public to see the last moments the girls were safe and unaware, walking together in their Manchester United shirts, chatting and laughing softly. A televised reconstruction of the girls' movements was broadcast nationally on August 10th. The program traced their last known steps, showing the community how much effort had gone into understanding the sequence of events. On August 12th, both sets of parents appeared on ITV's Tonight program, speaking with presenter Colin Baker. They made heartfelt appeals for information and for the safe return of their daughters. Their voices calm but filled with hope. Family members and friends also joined the appeals, amplifying the message to the wider public. These efforts generated over 2,000 calls and tips, each carefully logged into the investigation's Homes 2 database. Shortly after the girls went missing, Staffordshire police contacted investigators with suspicions about a man who had previously abducted a young girl in their jurisdiction. That case had involved a green Ford Mondeo with stolen number plates, and investigators noted that a similar vehicle had been seen in Glatton, Cambridgeshire. Although this lead was included in televised appeals, it ultimately did not provide a breakthrough. Several eyewitnesses came forward in the early days. Mark Tuck recalled driving past the girls at 6:30 p.m., noticing their distinctive football shirts and telling his wife, "Look, there's two little Beckhams over there." Another witness, Karen Greenwood, reported seeing them arm in arm along College Road minutes later, and a resident in Little Thetford claimed to see two girls matching their description the following morning. Reports of a suspicious white van led investigators to a caravan park in Wentworth, where the vehicle was seized, though it provided no clues. On August 12th, police issued a public appeal to trace a dark green saloon car seen on the A142, carrying two girls who appear to be struggling inside. A jogger later reported disturbed earth at Warren Hill, initially thought to be possible burial sites, but further investigation revealed only badger setts. Ian Huntley, a 28-year-old local caretaker, later told investigators that he had briefly spoken with the girls on August 4th outside his home, asking after his partner, Maxine Carr. Although he claimed the girls were cheerful, police noticed inconsistencies and suspicious behavior. Huntley's house showed signs of cleaning, and clothing remained on the washing line despite rain, raising further questions. A neighbor also reported seeing Huntley and Carr near their car, with Huntley appearing pale and agitated. Then, at approximately 12:30 p.m. on August 17th, a gamekeeper named Keith Pryor, accompanied by friends, discovered the bodies of the girls in a shallow irrigation ditch near RAF Lakenheath, more than 10 miles east of Soho. The girls had been missing for 13 days, and their bodies were already in an advanced state of decomposition. Pryor, noting an unpleasant smell days earlier, carefully approached the scene, ensuring his companion stayed back before notifying police. Investigators quickly deduced the identities of the victims, noting that the deaths had not occurred where the bodies were found. Hairs later identified as belonging to Jessica Chapman were discovered nearby, confirming the link. The following day, Cambridgeshire Deputy Chief Constable Keith Hodder publicly confirmed the discovery, assuring that both families had been informed and that, although formal identification would take a few days, investigators were confident that the bodies were indeed Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. For black screen or sleep-friendly narration, this part of the story can focus on the community's response, the meticulous investigative steps, and the careful, respectful handling of the discovery, emphasizing the tireless work of officers and the hope that justice would eventually be served. On August 21st, 2002, after careful DNA testing, both bodies were formally identified as Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. The confirmation brought a mixture of relief and heartbreak to the families and the community, as the tragic truth of the girls' fate became undeniable. 9 days later, a public memorial service was held at Ely Cathedral, providing a space for mourning and reflection. Around 2,000 people attended, including classmates, teachers, friends, and the 6 family liaison officers who had supported the families around the clock throughout the investigation. The service, led by the Reverend Tim Albin Jones, was solemn but filled with gentle reflection. He spoke of the hope for a positive change in how people treat one another, saying, "Would not the best and most lasting memorial to these two lovely young girls be a change for the better in how we behave towards each other?" Today's service is a small milestone in our shared journey of grief and sorrow. It is our hope that we may perhaps draw a line under one phase of our grieving and begin to look forward. The words carried a sense of community resilience, even in the face of such overwhelming loss. The wider public expressed grief in many ways. An online book of condolence received over 31,000 messages of sympathy as people from across the country shared their thoughts, prayers, and support for the families. On August 24th, football clubs nationwide observed a minute's silence before matches, uniting communities in a silent tribute to the young girls. An inquest into the deaths began at Shire Hall, Cambridge, on August 23rd. Coroner David Morris presented the findings to the court, noting that both bodies were partially skeletonized due to the passage of time. While the precise cause of death could not be definitively determined, the coroner concluded that asphyxiation was the most likely cause. He also confirmed that the girls had almost certainly not died at the location where their bodies were found. Forensic evidence suggested that their bodies had been moved to the irrigation ditch within 24 hours of their deaths. Supporting these findings, forensic ecologist and palynologist Patricia Wiltshire examined the crime scene. By analyzing the shoots of nettles and other ecological indicators, she estimated that the bodies had been placed at that location approximately 2 weeks before discovery, providing crucial context to the timeline of the crime. This combination of careful scientific analysis, public mourning, and community solidarity ensured that the memory of Holly and Jessica was preserved with dignity, even as the investigation continued to pursue justice for the two young girls. The funeral services for Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were held on consecutive days in September 2002. Both ceremonies took place at St. Andrew's Parish Church, led by Reverend Tim Albin Jones, providing a quiet and dignified farewell to the two young girls. Following the services, the girls were laid to rest in graves side by side at Soham's Fordham Road Cemetery, offering a permanent space for family and close friends to pay their respects. In accordance with the wishes of both families, the media refrained from reporting on the services, allowing a private and intimate farewell amid the ongoing grief. In the weeks following the disappearances, Ian Huntley, the school caretaker, reluctantly participated in several television interviews, including appearances on Sky News and the regional BBC program, BBC Look East. In these interviews, Huntley spoke of the shock that had gripped the local community and expressed his dismay at having been the last person to see the children alive. By the second week of the search, Huntley had become, somewhat unwillingly, an unofficial spokesperson for the community. He explained that his intention was to convey the collective frustration, anxiety, and hope of the people of Soham as the search continued. In one interview with Sky News correspondent Jeremy Thompson, Huntley spoke of holding on to a glimmer of hope that the girls would be found safe, recounting that he had last seen them walking toward the local library. During this same period, Maxine Carr, Huntley's partner, also spoke to the media. In a live interview, she confirmed Huntley's account, explaining that she had been bathing at the time and had briefly seen the girls at the doorstep before they walked away. She expressed her regret, saying, "I only wish we had asked them where they were going. If only we knew then what we know now. Then we could have stopped them or done something about it." These early media appearances, while intended to support the search and share community concern, also reflected the sense of helplessness and grief experienced by those closest to the events, underscoring the immense impact the disappearance had on the small town of Soham. Discussing the personalities of the two girls, Maxine Carr described Holly Wells as the more feminine of the pair, while noting that Jessica Chapman was more of a tomboy. Carr recalled an occasion when she had jokingly remarked to Chapman that, unlike many of her friends, she rarely wore a skirt. Chapman had responded by expressing a desire to be a bridesmaid at her own future wedding, saying she would willingly wear a dress for such an occasion. Carr also showed a thank you card that Wells had given her on the last day of the school year. Speaking of Wells in the past tense, Carr said she was just lovely, really lovely, before making a heartfelt appeal directly to the children. Just get on the phone and just come home. Or, if somebody's got them, just let them go. By the second week after the disappearances, Ian Huntley began to show physical signs of stress, losing weight, and displaying symptoms of insomnia. To one officer, he exclaimed, "You think I've done it? I was the last person to see them," before breaking down in tears. His erratic behavior and visible distress prompted a prescription for antidepressants on August 13th. Suspicion around Huntley continued to grow. Despite his participation in the search for the children, he frequently asked police officers detailed questions about the investigation, including inquiries about the progress of DNA testing and how long biological evidence could survive before deteriorating. One officer noted 3 vertical scratches, each about 3 centimeters long, on Huntley's left jaw, which he claimed had been inflicted by his dog. On August 16th, 12 days after the girls went missing, Huntley and Carr were formally questioned by police for the first time. Both interviews lasted approximately 7 hours, and witness statements were recorded before they were placed in a safe house in Histon. By this point, officers had received information from several residents in Grimsby who recognized Huntley from his television interviews. These witnesses recalled past allegations against Huntley, including a prior accusation of rape, and contradicted Carr's televised statements, revealing that she had been socializing in Grimsby Town Center on the night of the disappearances rather than at home in Soham, as she had claimed. That same evening, police launched a thorough search of both 5 College Close, Huntley's residence, and the grounds of Soham Village College, where he worked as senior caretaker. Huntley and Carr were placed under police watch at separate locations outside Soham. Every room in Huntley's home had evidently been meticulously cleaned in the days following the disappearances, with a distinctive lemony cleaning fluid noted by investigators. Despite his efforts, the search uncovered items of major importance to the case. At the school grounds, officers recovered clothing the girls had been wearing when last seen. Their Manchester United shirts, both charred and cut, were found in a bin inside a hangar at Huntley's workplace. Fibers from these garments matched samples taken from Huntley's body and clothing, as well as from 5 College Close, while his fingerprints were found on the bin itself. Huntley's Ford Fiesta was also examined. Despite having been recently cleaned, traces of brick dust, chalk, and concrete were discovered, identical in composition to the paving along the road leading to where the girls' bodies would later be found. Investigators noted that a cover from the rear seat was missing, and the boot lining had been replaced with an ill-fitting household carpet, suggesting deliberate tampering. With this evidence, police arrested Huntley and Carr on suspicion of abduction and murder at 4:30 a.m. on August 17th. Huntley initially refused to answer questions, appearing evasive, confused, and emotionally detached, sometimes drooling in what appeared to be an attempt to feign mental illness. Police eventually referred him for an extensive psychological evaluation. Carr, in contrast, admitted to lying about her whereabouts and Huntley's actions, revealing that he had claimed on August 4th that the girls had entered their home. Huntley had told her that Wells had needed help staunching a nosebleed and Chapman had sat on their bed while he assisted. Carr explained she later agreed to support Huntley's false story, believing it protected him from accusations. After being informed of the discovery of the girls' bodies and the physical evidence implicating Huntley, Carr broke down, shouting that it couldn't be true, despite maintaining an emotional attachment to him. By August 20th, police had gathered enough evidence from Huntley's home, car, and school grounds to formally charge him with 2 counts of murder. Huntley was charged while under observation at Rampton Secure Hospital in Nottinghamshire, and Carr was charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice, later facing additional charges of assisting an offender. While in custody, Carr maintained contact with Huntley, professing her love until December 2002. Huntley's mental state was assessed over almost 2 months. Consultant forensic psychiatrist Christopher Clark concluded that although psychopathic, Huntley had no major mental illness and was fit to stand trial. Huntley was subsequently transferred to Woodhill Prison and later Belmarsh, surviving a suicide attempt in June 2003. The trial began at the Old Bailey on November 5, 2003. Huntley pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of murder, while Carr faced charges of assisting an offender and perverting the course of justice. Prosecutor Richard Latham QC described how Huntley had lured the girls into his home by chance when Carr was absent, murdered them, and then attempted to destroy evidence and mislead police. Mobile phone data, eyewitness accounts, and forensic evidence were presented to show that Huntley had transported the bodies after the murders and that fibers from the girls' clothing matched his home and vehicle. Latham argued that the deaths were not accidental, stressing that 10-year-old girls do not simply die without intervention, and that Huntley's motive likely involved sexual intent. Huntley testified in his defense, claiming both deaths had been accidental while attempting to help Wells with a nosebleed, asserting that panic led him to inadvertently cause the girls' deaths. He admitted to concealing the evidence to avoid suspicion. Carr testified that she had lied to protect Huntley, claiming she had no knowledge of his guilt at the time. She emphasized her role was out of loyalty and fear of his false claims that he could be accused of wrongdoing. Closing arguments painted a picture of deception and manipulation. The prosecution described Huntley and Carr as accomplished liars who had conspired to protect Huntley for 12 days, with Huntley ultimately responsible for the murders. The defense acknowledged Huntley's role in the deaths, but argued there was no proof of intent or sexual motivation, urging the jury to consider manslaughter rather than murder. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned a majority verdict on December 17, 2003. Huntley was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the Lord Chief Justice to determine a minimum term. Carr was convicted of perverting the course of justice, but acquitted of assisting an offender, receiving a 3.5-year sentence. Huntley later received a minimum term of 40 years, meaning he would not be eligible for release until 2042. Mr. Justice Moses noted, "The order I make offers little or no hope of the defendant's eventual release, highlighting the severity of his crimes and the need to protect the vulnerable."